Hey everyone and welcome. This is the IELTS Focus, and in this lesson, we are diving into some seriously useful vocabulary that's going to help you crush your IELTS reading test.
So what we're going to do is break down the key academic words from a really fascinating passage called Tasmanian Tiger, Extinction is Forever. Getting these words down is going to be a huge help for understanding those tricky texts and really boosting your score.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to walk through 5 different themes from the article, and in each section, we'll tackle the most important vocabulary. Ready? Let's get started.
All right, let's jump right into our first section. This is all about the words used to describe the Tasmanian tiger itself, which is also known as the thylacine. Okay, first up we have misnomer. This is a fantastic academic word you should definitely know. It's what you call something when its name is inaccurate or just plain misleading.
And here's how it's used in the passage. You see, the thylacine's scientific name means something like dog-headed pouched dog. So calling it a tiger, just because it had stripes, that's a perfect example of a misnomer. It was way more like a dog than a cat.
Next up, outcompeted. This is a really key term you'll see all the time in science and history texts. It basically means that one group lost to another in the fight for things like food, territory, or other resources. So the key thing to understand here is that thylacines didn't just live in Tasmania, they were on mainland Australia too. But then humans brought dingoes, and the dingoes were just better hunters. The thylacines were outcompeted for food, and eventually that's why they disappeared from the mainland.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. In this next part, we're going to look at the vocabulary that explains why scientists even want to clone the thylacine in the first place. It's all about the human factor. Our next word is atone. This is a really powerful verb. It means to do something to make up for a mistake you made in the past. To show you're sorry and to try to set things right.
And this is so interesting because it tells us the motivation behind the whole project. The scientists aren't just doing this for fun. They see their work as a way to atone for the fact that humans hunted the thylacine into extinction. It's like a scientific apology.
Okay, now for derisive. This adjective is great for describing a reaction that's not just disagreement, but is full of scorn and mockery. Think of derisive laughter. It's not a friendly laugh. It's the kind of laugh that says, "That's the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard."
And wow, this quote from the text just nails it. When the idea of cloning the thylacine was first suggested, the scientific community didn't just disagree, they met it with derisive laughter. They thought it was a complete joke.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the science. This section is all about the language used to talk about this super ambitious process of de-extinction.
So the passage lays out this incredibly complex, multi-step plan. First, they have to get tiny bits of DNA from old museum samples. Then they have to copy those millions of times to build a whole genetic library. After that, they have to piece it all together into chromosomes and finally put it into an egg from a close living relative like a Tasmanian devil. As you can see, this is not simple stuff.
But with ambitious science come, massive challenges. And that brings us to our next key vocabulary word, which is perfect for describing just how huge these difficulties are. The word is gargantuan. Now, you could just say very big, but in academic writing, a word like gargantuan has so much more impact. It means something is just unbelievably enormous, almost on a different scale.
And the article uses it perfectly here. Just imagine trying to build that complete genetic library from scratch. It's not just a big job. The scientists themselves admit it's a gargantuan task. They know how huge the challenge is.
Okay, let's get into our final section, the great debate. And this part is packed with amazing vocabulary for talking about opinions and arguments. Seriously, these are gold for your IELTS writing and speaking tests.
So the passage brings up a few different arguments against the project. First, many scientists are skeptical. Basically, they just don't think it'll work. Some go even further, calling the idea fanciful, like something out of a fairy tale, totally unrealistic. Then there's this really interesting concern that success could make people blasé or kind of careless and indifferent about protecting the animals we have now. And all of this leads to a central quandary, which is a really difficult dilemma with no easy answer.
And that dilemma is really this classic debate, nature versus nurture. On the one hand, you have the nature argument that says behavior is mostly instinct or genetically hardwired. The idea that even if you raise a kitten with people, it still acts like a cat. But then the nurture side argues that key behaviors, especially for predators, are actually learned from their parents.
The worry is that a clone would just be a devil in tiger's clothing. It might look right, but it wouldn't know how to be a thylacine.
And that leaves us with this final, really thought-provoking question, which is at the heart of the whole debate. Is DNA enough? Is a creature just its genetic code? Or is its identity also made up of the culture and the knowledge that gets passed down through generations? It's a fascinating thing to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.